to the Scitalk 2018, presented by myself, John Kenny, Director of User Experience, and Apple Chi. What's your type?
Graphic designer.
Graphic designer. A lot of acronyms get thrown around: UX, UI, IA, UXD. And people think UI and UX are the same thing, and they're not. There's a distinct difference between UX, which stands for user experience, and UI, which stands for user interface. One is invisible to the user, and the other is very visual, and it has a reaction to the user based on whether they like it or not. One of the things we, as we were looking at this,
Two ketchups.
two ketchups. You know, we all remember the old bottle of ketchup, right? Or am I just that old? You know, the Heinz 57, keep hanging on it and everything like that.
Upside down.
And now, it only took them about 55 years to come up with the smart squeeze bottle, called it upside down. And that's a pretty simplistic view of what user experience is. You know, one, you know, I want my ketchup, let me get the bottle and squeeze it, and the other is, there's the ketchup bottle, let me fight with it, I got to stick a knife in it to break the air bubble and everything like that. And, you know, so the bottle is just all about design on that one, and the other one is more about the user experience.
Yes, for appearance, this one is not bad at all for user interface, but then it's just hard to use when you trying to vibrate.
So with all of that, everybody go back? I think I moved forward so far.
Is that UX?
Bad UX design.
It is.
Oh, okay. So Apple did a really nice job putting all of this together, and one of the things we wanted to say is simply put that UI is visual presentation, look and feel. You know, it's that colors, it's fonts that we choose and everything like that. But those impact the user experience as well. You know, bad color and things like that. So UX though is that blueprint. It puts the user at the forefront. It thinks about them, of what their needs are. If you want to build something, how should it work? If I have to use this every day, or you want me to engage with your business every day, it should work for me. It should be speaking to me. And that's that invisible layer that we never realized that is happening. UX is that, you know, it's a lot of research, it's psychoanalysis, it's architecture, it's all those things that, you know, you start doing personas and you create a roadmap based on what the clients want and figuring out how to meet the client's needs to the customer needs and bridging that gap. And then the UI is that deliverable that puts it all into motion and everything like that. It brings it all together so that, you know, once everybody is looking at it, the clients, the customers, you know, the delivery team and everything like that, there's a face to it now. Now we can see what it feels like. And it visualizes that UX.
Yes. So basically, the process would be firstly goes to user experience, and then it goes to UI, then development. So that should be the step by step.
Yeah, the development is there all along. You know, it's not to say that these are
You
all
made Eric
happening
very
in
happy.
vacuums. Yeah. I don't want Eric to come up and slap me.
I just inserted myself in the process anyway.
So user experience, it's keeping the user front of mind. Whenever you're designing an experience, you have to remember one thing: the user always has the option to leave. And this was a quote that a friend of mine took from me. Jeremy Epstein is a big believer in never stop marketing, and he has a blog post and everything like that. And I believe that when you start with anything, you start with the user in mind. UX tells the whole story. You know, we have a problem, we have a need, and we figure out what those steps are for that user to get from one point to the next and to solve for those problems. It drives the user-centered design. It thinks about how the placement of things are going to happen on the page, what the flow is, how are we taking all of this information, all of these wants and needs from different aspects of the project or for our digital needs anyway, and putting them into a space that makes sense for the user to get to. It delivers black and white, not a whole lot of color, not a whole lot of stuff to react to from the customer standpoint, from the end user standpoint. But from the customer standpoint, they get an idea of what the flow is, what the sitemaps are, understanding the arrangement of content. And then for development and design purposes, having a full deck of wireframes that will output with annotations of what the functional specifications are so that everybody can understand, and then it just keeps pushing that project forward. It keeps pushing everybody forward, and it allows for an opportunity for everybody to collaborate and put their ideas forward. But it's capturing it in all those places.
Before you go up, did you actually use this to build the new mobile stuff?
Yeah, everything except for the sitemap. UX also tests. We got to make sure it works well with real life. You say, oh yeah, I built this, take a look at it, and you walk away. You have no results. You don't know if it's working or not. So you test, you refine. UX is that living, breathing document or portion of a website. Once you have your design, your branding and everything like that, you don't want to keep changing that. Look at companies that keep changing their branding, and they end up failing. So you want to keep the user experience engaged. So hey, we found improvements. We found a better way of handling this for your needs. The end goal is to keep it simple. 2 + 2 should equal 4. Einstein failed math. Now for Apple.
Yeah, so for the user interface, so firstly, it is transferring the branding portion via the visual element to a digital product. So basically, like for UI, it included a lot of things. It included content, which meaning pictures, your text, your videos, etc. And also forms, meaning like button and drop-down list, maybe a checkbox. So it is represent all of those includedly, represently according to the branding. So if we created something in Scivantage, we wanted it to look like our own baby. I mean, if you created a baby, you do want it to look like your own, right? So
It's the wrong crowd.
So the point is, yeah, for guiding the, it is also responsible for guiding the user attentions towards different important things. So as you can see a little bit here, your attention goes to user's attention. So the UI is actually all about that, to drag in people's attention. So we all know that a button needs to look like a button that is clickable. And then the boldness, alignment, and also the space in between of lines is actually control the readability of the website or any digital product, which is, so it's basically which information that you get first. And also it creates an emotional response from the user to make product more livable, lovable, and more beautiful. So I think it's mostly creating a delightful connection from the user to what they are looking at. So they can look and feel the product and being, okay, this is beautiful or this is horrible. So there's a lot of methodology that we use in the UI. So mood board is one of them. You gathering informations and inspirations from all of those. It could be a building. It could be all of the icons. And then you can create something based on the mood board. This is another one just to show the difference. This is more like toned down and more like old school magazine looking. Also, we use Sketch and Brainstorm a lot. And this is something that we usually created called the brand guideline for digital product. So this is what we are going to do in Scitalks as well, to keep all of our digital product under our name and then in the brand. And also, always, very importantly, stay on trend. So we are going to have.
Do I have to stand up? Yep. Oh, crap.
So one of the things I always use as an acronym is the building of a house. You don't take a picture of the house off a wall and just go to a general contractor and say, build me that house. So Dory.
I want you to build me this house.
Okay. So if
Huge house.
you think about UX as the architect, my question would be, where do you want it built?
California.
How big of a plot? Do you have a plot of land?
I do 10 acres.
Okay. How many rooms? One giant room.
One giant padded room. I don't know. 10
You know,
maybe?
okay. How many people are going to live
5.
there? What kind of
My family's fine.
entertaining do you like to do? Is there
Dinner parties, outside parties.
outside parties? Okay. So, I mean, these are all questions about the user experience of how she's going to live in that home and getting an understanding of those needs and stuff like that. And then part of that is then to take that understanding and do some research and information gathering around the property that she selected and, building a blueprint around that. And then if she had taken that and asked Apple
Yes.
the same questions,
So as a UI person, I wouldn't be more concerning about things that different than John. So I would ask you, what's your favorite color?
Purple.
And what's the style you want your house to look like? Is it a Victoria style or modern European style?
I don't know, a country little style inside.
Okay. And what's your tone you want your house to look like? Is it more bright, more dark?
I want natural lighting.
Awesome choice. And do you like your lighting to be like more warm or more cold?
Warm.
Cool. And what's the last question? Sorry, I'm getting too much. So what's your favorite thing to do at house to make you happy?
Online shopping.
Cool. So as you can see, there's like different perspective from the UI person and UX person to the users that we are more concerning about. Yes. And then we have.
Where's the finished product? I want to see the big purple house.
That was
Oh, your pizza house purple.
Right here.
This isn't gonna be
Yeah,
purple.
well, we got some contractors
I want to
working
know
on
who the 5
that.
people who are going to live in it.
It's in development.
They
So-
told me to make everything up, so I did.
Tom Brady
So,
has a house.
so we have two examples of good and bad user experience. And the first one is a indication website for people with hidradenitis suppurativa, and I had worked on this. I was probably the 5th or 6th UX person on it, so I feel it is my responsibility to say that it really sucked. This was driven by design. The designers drove it. They drove the navigation, and I had to keep, once I got involved, I had to keep wrangling them in. And this is where, when design is driving things, and you don't have a structure and you don't have an organization, you have things that will be lopsided, such as the navigation. So what is HS has a drop-down menu, but could I have HS as a single page? Primary navigation, things like that, is then, you're creating a lopsided user experience, and you're not really accounting for all the content or the information that a user may want to have. And from a design standpoint, you might look at it and say, all right, well, it's appealing, I got my information, it's simple, it's easy to read, but that's fine. But the overall user experience, the structure of it, I don't think is a very good user experience. And I'm happy to say this. I told my client this too, I don't think it works this way. It shouldn't work this way.
It's
that why you don't work there anymore?
No, no. But another example would be, I didn't work on this, but this has been a great example to use because this is what elegant user experience is. The experience is the same from device to device to device. And if you want to know about responsiveness and think if a site is responsive or not, what you do is you take your browser, squeeze it, and you make sure that things start
Wow.
flowing
Very
and
cool.
fitting in. And no matter what you do, no matter what happens from there, from the large side, from the phone, from the tablet, the user experience is consistent and it's the same. You know, certain things might change. You know, shuffling your navigation suddenly becomes a hamburger stack, but the navigation is always there. And these are important things that, you know, people say, well, you know, the design is pretty, it looks great and everything like that, but I can't find anything. It's a terrible user experience, you know. How many times have you like, oh, I really like that, but it doesn't work, you know? Something in our phone, I mean, it does it all the time. But I think, Apple, if you wanted to add some comments to that.
Yeah, so as we can just conclude for those two examples that we show, that's something, I'll just quote from this designer and expert. So something that looks great but difficult to use is example of great UI and poor UX. And then while something is usable that is look horrible is not a great UX or not a good UI. So, here we wanted to have some time for Q&A. Yes.
Any questions?
When will my house be ready?
Is
You
there
got-
ever a time that there's a conflict, like, you think for the user, you need to do this, but Apple's going, that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen, I'm not gonna do it that way.
A lot of times there are conflicts.
How is that, who usually wins on that?
You know, it's a balancing act. I really want to get my way as much as possible. I've done it long enough. But then you have to think about what's best for the overall project. Sometimes you just have to let things go. You know, if Apple is saying something, and as a UX person, I have to have a design sense. I have to understand the visual design. I have to be able to, you know, appreciate that, all right, I'm not a graphic designer, but, you know, I have that sense, and I'm going to collaborate with Apple. Say, you know, come in, you know, put your stamp on this now. There are art directors and graphic designers that I worked with, and that, you know, they take the wireframes, they take all that work, and they push it aside, and they come up with what they want to do. And that's a no-no. That's something I wouldn't stand for.
Yeah, I think also it's very important that both of us thinking of it is not built for us, it's for the user. So whatever good for the user, we should have an agreement on that because that's good for them to use, not each of us. So we don't need to get in too much like preference from each of us getting into that because it's not for us.
What if Joe just tells you to do something?
Is he the one signing the check? You know.
Depends on what check.
Yeah, any questions?
Yeah.
So what are you guys working on these days?
I've been working on the mobile app. I've just completed a comprehensive deck of wireframes that are going into development. And what I've seen so far in just the early stages is very beautiful. You know, really, it's a when you do a comprehensive deck of user experience and then it starts going into development, they're creating that framework, you know, and if they're following it, and they don't ask you questions and it looks that way, that means you did a good job. You know, I don't want any other you know, rewards or anything like that, you know, or awards. It's just, you know what? They can do their job, I did my job. You know, if there's got to be some questions and answers and we have to figure it out, we collaborate together and figure it out, as long as that we're maintaining that user experience, and everything else should go along smoothly. One other thing is that I'm working on some of the responsive pieces for the website. Got an example of skinny ties. You know, it's something that I try to incorporate into everything I do. You think about a mobile-first experience, you know, so you go to the lowest common denominator and then expand outward. You know, when you're going from the largest common denominator, or the largest denominator, and trying to expand inward, you're actually pigeonholing yourself into something. So you have to backward engineer. And dealing with our clients, we're dealing with financial services and everything like that. So it's a lot of information, it's difficult to get all of that information onto a small screen. So you have to kind of think about the interaction to get to that information.
How do you go about measuring whether a UI or UX is successful or not when we have such limited contact with the actual end users?
You know, if the clients don't come back and complain, you know, you've done a pretty good job. But if anything, I try to get metrics as much as possible. Give me a metrics of how many users are using it. Get me that information. If you can get any analytical information as possible, that's always helpful. You know, because as you're iterating and you're going forward with newer technologies and building upon that, you want to make sure you're not throwing away what you did right and ruining that user experience. You know, you want to build upon those things.
Bill, do you have any like standards? For example, how many clicks users should have to get certain functionality?
When I started 20 years ago, 2 clicks was too many. You know, that was that. You know, it can't be more than 2 clicks away. And I think with the advent of like parallax navigation, the phones and things like that, the idea is to try to figure out ways to bring the content and information to the user. You know, not make them go to it. The old way in the web world was, you know, you have navigation, you click it, and you go to a new page and things like that. So there are ways that you could still have a number of clicks, but it's not relevant to the user, or it's not recognized by the user because of the way that the functions that you might be using for them to get to that information. You know, and making it feel more like getting to them. So the more than 2 clicks is still relevant in a lot of ways, you know, and in fact with the mobile phones and the 4G network, you know, we also have to think about the size of graphics and things like that, something we haven't had to do for a very long time. But you want to make sure that the load times aren't there and everything like that. So it's kind of going full circle to what it was like in 1999, 1998. You know.
And did you work for different industries before, or it's always financial?
No, I've worked with, I've made a point to work with as many different industries as possible.
Do you see differences in the UX perspective?
Sometimes, but not always. Usually it's always the same. The only time I've seen the differences are when there's highly, like in pharmaceuticals, highly regulatory, you know. So you want that user experience, you can't make that user experience as great as you'd like, you know, because you've got to filter in all the regulatory information and stuff like that. But overall, no, the user experience, the user is a user is a user. And if you're not letting the user get to the end goal or making it difficult for them to get to the end goal, then you're not doing your job.
All right, so web design and web development is very, very trendy. And what do you think right now on websites and in UI, UX, what is the worst sin?
The worst sin is not being ADA compliant. It's the biggest sin. If you are not compliant to persons with disabilities, then, you know, you have no business creating anything.
Like section 508.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any religion around user testing versus test and learn?
I like test and learn. You know, I've worked with a lot of companies where they invest a lot of money into user testing, and the results don't really yield the quality that you want, because you kind of already know what are the best practices. You know, if there's something that's very large, like financial services, it has a lot of functionality involved in it and things like that. And there are things like, well, if we implement this, it kind of breaks that old tradition or whatever, you know, we have to be careful about that. You know? We might want to test something like that. But spending a lot of time testing, I think it can end up being a detriment, taking too much time on the project, and there's a lot of things that you can be a lot more agile with. If you get it out to market, test it, get the results back, and say, oh, you know, we can fix that, and then go push it back out.
Are there any best practices when you're working in an organization that has many masters? User testing in one way can sort of give you something to focus on so that you're building in one way rather than multiple ways, but any other practices you might suggest in terms of how you get alignment across multiple, including the clients of those masters?
Well, that's a good point. Like with clients, you may need to have some user testing to validate what you're pushing on the client to do and stuff like that. But I would say dealing with multiple masters and stuff like that, you just you try to hear the voices from all sides and come up with a solution as best as possible. It's meeting the needs, you know. It's not just meeting the needs for the business or the people who are pushing the project, but you have to stand up and advocate for the user. You know, we know there are best practices out there for navigation, for functionality and things like that. You know, if we're following those best practices, there's other things that we can enhance upon. You know, bring forward the best user experience as possible, and be an advocate for that.
Not sure it matters, I just like my buttons on the left.
What's that?
I just like my buttons on the left.
Buttons on the left.
John, for our customers who use our products, do their screens, are they basically seeing the same kind of thing with just their branding to it? Is the shell of it, the structure kind of the same? So if you want to make a change, are you making it to everybody? Or?
I would defer to Eric on that, but my intention would be yes. Like, you know, if we're selling the WealthScope products to our clients and if they take everything that we give them, the functionality should be the same. How they arrange it, it could be different. You know, that's the UI portion of how they can control things. But you know, they put their branding on it, their color schemes, their font treatments and stuff like that. But functionally, that invisible layer, it should always work the same.
Yeah, we don't do UX customizations for
Yeah.
clients, but UI, yeah, that does happen.
Well,
Please don't.
We may not do that, but that goes back to the multiple master question. Everybody's got an opinion about how something should work. And so we definitely get pushed and stretched on making one piece of shared functionality work in multiple different ways. Now that's a constant challenge, and it pushes the UX.
Yeah, when you're pushing the UX like that, you're looking for the best result that's going to serve all masters, you know. But the primary master, in my mind, is the end user, you know, and that's who I have to advocate for. You know, if I'm not advocating for them, then I'm just serving the needs of the business, and we're, you know, I'm pushing out.
And that's often where those challenges come from.
Right.
Who's ever asking for saying it should work this way, they're typically not advocating for the user. They're advocating
For their
themselves.
Right. And, sometimes it's easier to just prototype it and show them this, how they want it, and say, well, this is how it's going to work. And what we're proposing doesn't work that way, works better if you follow our proposal. And sometimes you have to just say, okay, we'll do it that way. My job is not to say, this is the only way to do it. My job is to say, this is the best way to do it in my experience. These are the best practices, but at the end of the day, if that's what the client wants, that's what the client gets. That's the fine line. That's the balancing act. It is psychoanalysts. That's where the psychology comes in. Why are they thinking this way? What is it that I don't understand about their business that they want it this way? So that's where I have to start doing the digging and some research and understanding better.
And also, I feel like sometimes when a client is asking for something, they have something in mind. There's a particular reason for that they ask for particular things. It's not that I like this way, but what on that you like. So I think more things that we can figure out this portion, we will be able to more kind of leverage the weight of client-driven and user-driven.
Yep.
How do you source control the UX product in general? How do you source control your UX product? And do you have like wireframes or frameworks?
How do you manage changes, like, basically?
When you see a deck come from me that says version 2.0, that's usually version 30. I manage a library of wireframe templates that I use, and I try not to reinvent the wheel too much. Best practices, we know drop-down lists are a drop-down list is a drop-down list. The radio buttons are radio buttons, checkboxes are checkboxes. Using header navigation schemes versus a hamburger stack navigation scheme versus a left or right-hand navigation, mega navigation. Those things I have a library of. So version control for me is as soon as I make an edit to a document, it's a new version.